Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very exciting segment today on the 14th day of June 2023, and a beautiful day out there, 11 degrees and mostly sunny. Hey, how are you doing this morning? It's wonderful to have your company as usual. So what do we have for you today? We'll have the news update, and today's local segment, we have the speech by our Federal Treasurer at the Islamic College of Brisbane's citizenship ceremony, which took place in the weekend. So let's get the news on the road first, and then we will be finishing off with the functions and events for today. So once again, if you've just joined us, welcome and thanks for joining the show.
In breaking news, former US President Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty after appearing in a Miami court on federal charges. Hundreds of his supporters and some opponents gathered outside the building. He's the first ever US president to be charged with a federal crime and stopped off to meet crowds after leaving court.
So I think it's going great. I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt. We have a country that's got no borders. We have a country that's got nothing but problems. We're a nation in decline, and then they do this stuff. And you see where the people are. We love the people.
A warning, this story contains the images of Indigenous people who have died. Communities across the country are mourning the loss of the 10 victims of Sunday night's Hunter Valley bus crash. The victims came from 5 states, with most of the dead in their 20s or early 30s, and many associated with the Singleton Roosters Football Club. The bus driver, Brett Button, has been released on bail after fronting court yesterday on multiple driving charges. In the UK, a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 3 people were found dead on the street in the city of Nottingham on Tuesday. 3 more were injured after an attempt to run them over with a van. Nottinghamshire police are working with counter-terrorism officers to find a motive. And Queensland police are still searching for a newborn baby girl who's believed to be with a young woman, Chloe Bornan. The baby was taken from the Ipswich hospital.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on the news in brief. Once again, our heart goes out to all those people, in that crash there. And they're all closely related, and they were all with that soccer club there as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, as I promised, today's live segment is we'll go to the Islamic College of Brisbane, where our Federal Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, is addressing everyone present and, of course, the new citizens on the citizenship ceremony.
Thanking Auntie Betty for sharing culture in her characteristically generous and kind way, and for her leadership and friendship in our local community. I wanted to thank Ali Kadri, the CEO of this wonderful school, this wonderful welcoming school, for the work that he does, not just on behalf of the students and staff here at this school, but the community more broadly as well. And I wanted to acknowledge Auntie Jennifer as well. A very good friend of mine. I know how much work she puts into making sure that these ceremonies can go ahead here at ICB. And so I wondered if you wouldn't mind putting your hands together for Auntie. Now, because Salim and Yara have done such an incredible job acknowledging all of the dignitaries already, I won't try and go through all of the names once again, but to say to the community leaders and elders who have chosen to spend Saturday afternoon with us here at ICB, I wanted to convey to you how much we appreciate that as well. Everybody here gets hundreds of invitations, literally hundreds of invitations every weekend, and the fact that they've chosen to be here with us means a great deal to us. And so thank you very much for the leadership you show in our communities, but also for taking the time to be here to celebrate the new citizens as well. And in acknowledging the political leaders who have joined us this afternoon, can I be so bold as to pretend to speak on all of their behalves, whether it's David, Teresa, John, Angela or Kim. When I say that the pride that many of you feel today about this big, momentous day in the trajectory of your lives and the lives of your families, we feel that pride very deeply as well. I'm confident that I speak for all of the political representatives when I say that we consider being involved in these citizenship ceremonies to be at the very, very top of the list in terms of the things that we enjoy in representing our communities, our country, our state and our local councils as well. And so I appreciate them being here. And I wanted to tell you why we're so proud to be here. And that is because if you thought about it for a moment and tried to think, what would be the nicest thing that you could say about a local community like ours or about a country like ours? If you tried to think what would be the nicest thing that you could say about Logan or Brisbane or Ipswich or Queensland or Australia, what would that thing be? And the nicest thing that you could say was that you want to be part of it. You want to be part of it. And that at its very core, amidst all of the formalities that we will need to go through in a moment to make sure that we do everything we need to do to make you citizens of Australia.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, that very wonderful address there by our Federal Treasurer to the new and the newest Australian citizens on Saturday at the International Islamic College of Brisbane. Well, right now, the topic that everyone's been talking about, the referendum. Yes or no? The choice is yours, but we will bring to you some commentary from both sides. And I said we'd like to remain neutral. Voice is something that is being mooted, and this is what the referendum is all about. But everyone has their own democratic right to exercise that.
Dean Parkin, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Sarah.
Now, the opposition leader Peter Dutton said today that the way forward for reconciliation is to drop the voice from the referendum. Would you ever consider that?
Well, look, we're at the very, very end of a very long process, Sarah, that has turned over many different options as to what the best form of constitutional recognition should look like. We asked Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples through the Uluru Statement from the Heart in 2017 what the most meaningful form would look like, and very clearly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people said it's got to be practical, it's got to be meaningful, it's got to be through a voice. So we've just gone through another parliamentary process. This issue has been over-examined. Everybody's had their go at it. We're about a week away from the bill finally passing the Parliament, as you say, triggering the referendum. We can't wait for that to happen and for the campaign to kick off properly.
Now, Noel Pearson at the same time, he's made some comments and he says the focus of your campaign should be more on the issue of constitutional recognition and that the voice is just a means to achieving that. Should there be a rebalancing of the campaign?
Well, firstly, I've just got to say Noel has been an absolute champion for this issue for a very long time. And when he says he has something to say on the campaign, you obviously listen. We've been very clear all the way through that this is about those two parts. It is about recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the Constitution as the First Peoples, and that the most meaningful way through that is a voice. I mean, I was out in Barunga last week talking to Aboriginal people from the most remote communities in the Northern Territory, and they were very clearly talking about the need for both. The need for a unifying moment through this recognition piece, and importantly for their communities, the practical need for a voice to address some of the outstanding issues that they face. So, we're going to get plenty of inputs into the best way we can achieve a successful vote. That's all about getting success, and so we look forward, and we'll continue to work with Noel and others that have inputs into the best way forward. Now,
there was some different polling information that came out today. One in the 9 newspapers showed support for the voice falling below the critical 50%. Is it possible that the Yes campaign did fail to capitalise on the clear support that it had earlier in the year?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. You mentioned that there were a number of different polls. There was another poll that showed that support had levelled out at about that 60% mark. So it sort of demonstrates how fraught it is commentating on the polls as they go through. But clearly over the last couple of months, it is clear that there has been an increase in the contest on this particular issue. We always knew that was going to happen. We always knew that a referendum is not an easy thing to win, and it hasn't helped that a lot of the conversation has been bogged in that Canberra bubble with politicians and lawyers thrashing it out. That's why we're so excited about this process ending likely next week, the parliamentary process. And the real conversation that needs to be happening here, the conversation with communities across the country, can really kick off in earnest.
Now, we'll come back to some of the questions and the impact of the Canberra bubble in a moment. But first of all, I think in one of those polls, they said that only 1 in 3 voters could confidently explain what the Voice is. Is that part of the problem, that people don't know exactly what it's for and what its impact will be?
Well, the experience that we've had in the campaign, and this has been over many years, over the 6 years since the Uluru Statement, is that people want to know when they're supporting a voice that it's going to have a practical impact. They're not necessarily all that focused on reading a 100-page, detailed policy document, but what they want to know is that by voting yes for recognition and voting yes for a voice, that they're doing something practical, that this is going to have an impact on the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And as I said last week, it couldn't have been clearer from the people out at Barunga across the Northern Territory that it absolutely is about practical change. Now, we also know that we're about 4 months out from the vote. The date hasn't actually been set yet. So there is time still to have that further conversation, to further explain what this is about. And when we do, there is an incredible amount of underlying goodwill and curiosity there. And I think that is something that we can work with throughout this campaign.
Well, help me out now. Just in order, can you articulate the practical impacts of the Voice? I know this is frustrating because it's something that you've been thinking about for an extremely long time, but for those people coming to it new, if you would, just articulate again the practical impact it would have.
Well, every year we see something like the Closing the Gap strategy, and that has been a bipartisan commitment, and there's been, unfortunately, a lack of progress on some of the key issues. Take, for example, mental health and suicides. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people commit suicide at a rate of twice of the non-Indigenous population. And unfortunately, despite the years of investment and the years of goodwill across the political spectrum, that problem's actually getting worse. It's not getting better. What we need to do is we need to go to the communities, we need to understand what's happening, particularly with young people, and get the voices of those people at the table, informing the decisions and the policies and the laws that have an impact on things like mental health. Because what we're doing at the moment is just not working. It's just not working, and that's got to change. The voice is absolutely the foundation. We know that when you involve Indigenous people in those decisions, we get better outcomes. It's as simple as that. And so that's how the voice is going to have a practical impact.
Now, you mentioned before that there has been some impact of the debate that's been going on in Canberra. Michaelia Cash today said that if the referendum is successful, the nation that we know today would be irreparably damaged, was her description. So how has the debate in Parliament around what the Voice will be and what its impact will be, how much has that hurt your campaign?
Look, I think particularly as the debate has gotten more politicised, it hasn't been helpful. I think what it shows is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, when we made the decision through the Uluru Statement from the heart, basically we issued it to the Australian people. We said the politicians have had their go in the past and they haven't been able to rise to the challenge. They haven't been able to rise to the challenge of unifying the country, and they haven't been able to rise to the challenge of finding that real practical change, that game changer for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So we put our faith in the people of Australia. We said it's time to put it to the people of Australia through a referendum. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, in particular in Parliament, has proven that to be the correct strategy, and that's why we're looking forward to this next period. Once the conversation leaves Parliament and gets out into the communities, it's a different conversation, and that's one that we're very keen to really ramp up.
Dean Parkin, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
So there you go, Dean Parkin's there, and as a responsible media outlet, we will also be looking at both sides. We will get the S campaign people in here, we will get the saying no ones as well, to see why they are saying what they are saying. As I mentioned before, that the decision is entirely yours, but without being biased, we'd like to know from both sides of the campaign as to what the consequences are, what and how have they come to the conclusions, and what would it look like? Will it represent everyone? Will the representation of the indigenous community be, the leadership, will that be accepted, or would the leadership or the representation be challenged as well? So will it be creating more divide, or is it long time coming and now is the time to move forward and do it, all of this? Well, next up, let's hear from Wiradjuri woman, who tells the reconciliation story in the new movie.
Family means a whole lot to me, like any other family, you just want to be close, have relationship, and just do things together and just be a family and share that love and, that warmth with each other, and it means a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's so important,
Yeah, it's support structure.
Yes.
You were taken away from your families twice, Brenda, and yet, from what I know of you, you're a very strong woman. You're quiet, but strong. How has it affected you?
I think it's the strength that I saw my mother and fathers go through on both sides, while going back and looking for answers on both sides. And I think it's their strength that helped me to understand I've got the same strength inside me, to do this and to be able to share the story and to be able to share truth.
Your story, Brenda, you and your 7 siblings were living, for the memories that you may have of that, a happy life.
Yep.
You were taken from your biological parents, and that's where you met your adopted parents.
Yep.
Can you tell me what life was like during that time, being removed from your biological parents, if you have memories of that, and then what it was like with your adopted family?
Well, I can't remember that because I was like 2 years old when I was taken. So the first memory going back to my biological family was when I had that vision of my white father taking me across the road and taking me back home. And from there on, I didn't understand the situation. And of course, nobody told me anything. But it wasn't their fault. It's just that's how it was. So for me to understand that, I think I suppressed the trauma of it all, and just had to go through life, and as an adult now trying to understand my story. And that's why it was so important for me to go back and find the answers, but also find healing through it all.
And of course, this story first manifested itself in your book, and now it's become this story on film as well. Was it difficult for you to relive the story first, writing it, and now having this film out there?
Yes, because going through story, I learnt so much about myself, and I didn't realise I was carrying all this trauma and hurt and pain, and I didn't realise I was reflecting that on others, So I had to interrogate myself and my own story to be able to understand it, but to also pull myself up and say, hey, I can't be hurting people just because I've been hurt, because along the way I've learned that hurt people. So, but I've also learned that heal people. So to be able to share a healing story now.
Lovely.
To say a healing story, what a good thing to have done, because there are stories, there are things that have happened, but bringing it forward, writing some things, reliving that, and when it's made into a movie, then you find out certain aspects and certain way that you might have been behaving, and not could not explain why it was like that. So when you relive, then you realize, maybe there was a stress, there was trauma, there was this that I was going through. I did affect many other people's life as well. So well done on that. The last lead-out story for today is the takeover of the Cavalry Public Hospital in ICT. Was it done properly?
Look at the way they behave like bullies, like dictators. A quasi-dictatorship here in the ACT.
The current hospital site is the best location.
There's very few things that wake
people up and just, get them anxious and angry, but this has done it.
In Canberra, the Territory Government is taking over one of its main public hospitals, which up until now had been owned and run under contract by a Catholic institute, the Little Company of Mary.
A free and fair country, symbolised by this magnificent building here, is under threat here in the ACT.
There are some who will want to take this as an attack on the Catholic Church. I want to assure members that this is no such thing.
The deal was struck in 1971 by the Commonwealth before the ACT was given self-government rights.
It's cost about $24 million.
The Little Company of Mary constructed, then operated Calvary Public Hospital on the north side of Canberra. The larger Canberra Hospital is on the south side. They're the backbone of the health system in the capital, and both are run as public hospitals. But while the staff who run Canberra Hospital work for the Public Health Agency, the roughly 1,800 staff at Calvary are for now employees of Calvary Healthcare.
The safe and orderly transition of Calvary Public Hospital Bruce employees, assets and services to the Territory, and compensation on just terms.
Calvary resisted what it called a hostile takeover in the ACT Supreme Court, but its application was dismissed. The Territory will now go ahead with a formal acquisition date on July 3, less than 3 weeks away. A new hospital will be built on the site at a cost of more than $1 billion.
If we're going to invest that into a new hospital, we want that hospital to be owned by the ACT government, by the people of Canberra, not by a private entity.
In December, fires at Calvary took all 7 of its operating theatres offline, in a territory with just 20 public theatres. The government says the fires exposed problems with managing public hospital capacity across 2 systems.
We've got one hospital that tends to carry the load whenever there's a surge in demand or a problem in another part of the system, and we need to be able to balance that across 2 hospitals. The only way we can really achieve that is if we have a single operator.
We've been working in the ACT for 44 years, sharing resources and sharing load right across that system. So I'm not quite sure why that's all of a sudden became an issue.
It's the damning report the minister knew was coming that gives an insight into one of the most toxic health systems in the country.
Critics of the plan point to allegations of cultural problems at the main Canberra hospital and the management into which Calvary will now be absorbed.
One of the most disappointing elements of this debate has been the tendency for critics of the decision to then turn around and denigrate Canberra Health Services. Yes, there have been some cultural challenges at Canberra Hospital, but there have also been some cultural challenges at Calvary Public Hospital.
I think our culture is pretty good, but it's not up to me to talk about other services and the cultures that may be in those particular services.
People are asking Anthony Albanese to intervene, and so far he's not.
The takeover has been vigorously opposed by the Canberra Liberals, but it's also caught the attention of federal Conservatives who want a Senate inquiry to investigate the takeover.
I just have some questions about the ACT government's proposed acquisition of Calvary Hospital.
It's a bit unusual for the Nationals to take up a cause that's related to a hospital right here in the capital city, isn't it?
Well, no, we spend about half a year down here. When I go, I don't pretend to be a great Catholic, but I still go to Mass. And when I go there, you meet other people say, well, we want someone to stand up for this. This is a hospital that was brought about by the Little Sisters of Mary. It's premised on a religious view, but it's hardly a sinister organisation. It's hardly a cabal of witches in the dark arts. You should leave people and their religious beliefs alone. They're not hurting anybody.
Opposition leader Peter Dutton said it was an extraordinary attack on freedom of religion and called for the Prime Minister to intervene.
But Mr Albanese hasn't. He should do that. And if that doesn't work, then look at other alternatives.
The ACT Health Minister says there will be additional services at the hospital after the takeover.
Women who come in for a caesarean will be able to get a tubal ligation at the same time. Women who've just been given birth will be able to access information about contraception. But any argument that we're suddenly going to start performing elective abortions at this hospital is completely baseless.
An ACT Government Committee on Health found in an April report that Calvary had refused to perform a procedure known as a D&C on a woman who had an incomplete miscarriage, because it's a process also used in abortions.
We look at the person in front of us, and if someone is in an emergency situation, we will deal with that. I just don't believe the way they portrayed us in that was a fair representation of who we are and how we operate.
The report said it was problematic that one of the ACT's major hospitals is, due to an overriding religious ethos, restricted in the services that can be delivered to the Canberra community. It is also reasonable to assume that a significant number of Canberrans would be unaware of the religious model of care, which underpins Calvary Hospital's operation and impacts on their available services.
There will be people in Canberra who are very well aware that Calvary Public Hospital is run by a faith-based organisation, and for them that will colour their view about their safety or their potential experience, either positively or negatively when attending Calvary Public. There are many other people in Canberra who will just see it as a public hospital, who will just treat it as a public hospital, who wouldn't actually think about the fact that it's provided by a Catholic organisation.
It's called Calvary Hospital. It's not called the Wonderful World of Disney. The Little Sisters of Mary, who do you think they are? A bowling group.
As far as our ethos and all of that sort of stuff, that is definitely what drives our services, but that's got nothing to do with the fact that we're Catholic. It has everything to do with the fact that we put people at the centre of the way we deliver care.
The ACT government plans to introduce voluntary assisted dying laws later this year. Clare Holland House, here on the shore of Lake Burley Griffin, is Canberra's only dedicated palliative care hospice, a place that cares for people as they die. The government already...
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio, and that report there. Right now, let's take a look at some of the functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's about all we have time for you in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company on this beautiful day today. Don't forget, it's 11 degrees, mostly sunny, getting up to about 24 later in the day. And tomorrow we are back with some more news. And we have some upcoming events that we will be, bringing through here, through the station. We'll be talking to the S campaign people. We'll be looking at the other side as well. Maybe someone from LNP who says no, why the voice is not a good thing. So we will talk about all this in the lead up to it as well. We'll be talking about the Palki festival that's coming up, and we'll get messages from everyone to come and talk about that. So that's coming up as well. So that's a lot that's going to be happening right here. So stay tuned. As I mentioned before, it's always a great pleasure to have you on the show. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye for now.